Hello, my name is Dietmar Dörschlag. I'm an Atlassian certified business consultant with Valiantis, and we are the premier platinum solution partner in the Atlassian ecosystem. Thank you for joining me today. Today, I want to share with you some insights in how you can use Jira advanced workflows to handle field level security via a reflective workflow transition. What's the use case? As you might know, Jira does not allow field level security, which makes it really challenging for certain teams to allow certain team members only, to update particular data points on an issue. For example, a software team would allow only certain users to set the priority of incoming development work. Or in an HR project, certain data is, of course, sensitive and only privileged users should be allowed to change that data. You can also, of course, think about a legal team that deals with very sensitive legal information, and only certain users should be allowed to update that information. Now, it's important to note here that the situation I'm describing is for teams where the issue, the piece of work in the Jira itself, is not sensitive and is therefore not locked down via issue security schemes. It is a particular data point in that issue that contains sensitive data, and therefore only privileged users should be allowed to change a particular field in an issue. This field should not even be visible to any other users who can otherwise access that issue. Now, as I said earlier, Jira does not ship with field level security. That's unfortunate, but that's uh, just the way it is. And we can instead use a really cool and very simple advanced workflow concept to build this solution out. The solution requires a few configuration elements, which I'm going to cover in the next few steps here. We handle this through what's called a self-reflective workflow transition, and the transition has a condition. The condition is set that only users who are members of a certain group would be able to transition to a status which then brings up a transition screen where privileged users can edit that field. Now let's step into Jira in a sandbox that I have and see how this works. First thing we need to build is a very simple transition screen. In this particular scenario, I want privileged users to update the priority field in a software development project. This team has a lot of work coming in, and only privileged users should be allowed to set the priority field, the value on the priority field on this issue. On the screens that I'm using on this particular project, I'm not even showing the priority field, but I created a transition screen which only includes the priority field. The second thing that I need to create is a user group. This, of course, can only be done by org administrators. I'm an Atlassian admin in my sandbox organization that I have created. And here I created a simple group and call it Priority Update Group. And this group has 3 privileged members, all of whom would be then allowed to, in a workflow transition, to update that particular field. Now, where it gets a little bit involved, a little bit challenging, is to actually set up this workflow. It's not that difficult, so let me walk you through that. So in this particular project, I use the out-of-the-box simplified Kanban workflow. Now, I cannot, important to emphasize, I cannot edit an in-flight active workflow. So I had to just create a copy of that workflow before I switch or swap that workflow scheme back into the project. And I call it software simplified workflow priority update. Now I want users in the selected for development. This is when the work comes into the software team. This is where I want users from the group that I created, only those users, to update the priority field. So what I did is I created a transition called set priority. Now let's edit this workflow. I can show this real quick. So I click on the edit button. The workflow editor comes up. And here I'm now clicking on that transition. And that's what's called a self-reflective workflow transition, which means that this workflow transitions from status selected for development to status selected for development. And yes, in this transition, I bring in the transition screen update priority, where the field priority would then allow privileged users to update that particular field. Now also, I set the condition. And the condition that is set here is a condition that says only users in the group priority update group can execute that transition, which means that you have to be a member of that group that the org admin created to be allowed to transition and then be presented with the workflow transition screen, which would then only allow those privileged users to update the priority field. Now, all build elements are in place. So let's test this out. So I am in my marketing project and I'm creating a new issue. I'm creating a task, and the task is create 10 new marketing bullet points. Now, as you can see, as I'm creating this issue, the priority field is not visible on the screen. It is something that non-privileged users should not even be allowed to see. So the issue is created. Now, let's find the issue. Issue 10 or issue MTC2 is created. I'm bringing up that issue, and now I'm moving this issue from backlog to selected for development. And in this particular workflow transition, I'm now presented with a self-reflective transition, but it is visible in the actions dropdown, not in the workflow transition workflow dropdown. So I go to the actions dropdown, click on set priority, and I am presented with the priority field. It brings in the default priority that my instance has set up. So I'm setting this to high, and I am now setting the priority. Now, what you notice here is that it did not advance the workflow to the next status because it's self-reflective back to the same status. I am logged in as a user, a member of the group that is allowed to do that transition and therefore allowed to update that field. If I go into any other status, you see that that set priority option is no longer visible because I only built that transition in one particular workflow. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope this information was helpful. It is a very simple solution to address the need to only allow privileged users to update certain data points on an issue. In absence of field level security, you can use a self-reflective transition in a workflow. Thank you very much and have a great day.